The issue of abortion and late-term abortion remains in the news. The Kermit Gosnell trial wrapped up on Monday. The jury is still with the verdict. It's taken a little while, but earlier this week, Stephanie Gray with the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform was down in Philadelphia. She joins us now in Toronto. And Stephanie, what was it like being in that courtroom in Philadelphia with a man facing charges for such horrific acts? Just to give people the example, if they forget, killing babies that were born alive is an abortion that didn't go the way he planned, or maybe it did, but the baby was born and he snipped their spinal cord with a pair of scissors. What was it like being in the room with that?
Bizarre. Honestly, it's hard to find words to capture how I felt being in the room, hearing everything, because I heard weeks worth of witnesses' statements being summarized by the prosecutor to the jury in the last few hours of Monday. And then even seeing Gosnell himself come out. I mean, when you hear about what he does, you know, like you say, snipping necks, you think he's going to have horns coming out of his head. He's going to look pure evil. He looks normal. He looks like all of us. Of course he does. Yet he does something that is indeed purely evil. But as I watched him come out and even smile and nod at Father Frank Pavone of Priests for Life, who was directly kind of sitting behind him in the media area, you know, it reminded me of how he's on trial, but in a sense, all of us have to do our own introspection and say, maybe he committed abortion, but if I permitted abortion, have I let this happen through indifference?
And that's a question for people that may not be on the pro-life side. You and I are very openly pro-life. You're a pro-life activist. I speak out on the issue all the time. But this trial and what Gosnell is accused of doing, what he has done, because he doesn't deny this, he just says there was nothing wrong with it, then we have to question people that are not pro-life, that may be saying, well, I'm fine with abortion. Is this part of what they are allowing?
This, absolutely. Abortion leads to infanticide. It leads to all kinds of other human rights violations because it basically sets a standard that if a little human gets in the way, you can dispose of that human. In Gosnell's case, he did it out of the womb. That's why he's on trial. But what's the difference between him and, say, Dr. Fraser Fellows, London, Ontario's own late-term abortionist who kills babies up to 23 weeks and 6 days? And when I debated him, I asked him, has he ever done an abortion in which a baby has been born alive? And he said, no, he's never seen that. And the reason is because of the method of choice he uses when it comes to killing children is a D&E where they are dismembered in their mother's bodies, taken out limb by limb. He guarantees they're never going to come out alive. But how is he any different from Gosnell? He just does it in a different location.
The pro-life blogger Big Blue Wave a little while ago transcribed from French a woman who called into a talk radio program in Montreal. She'd had 5 abortions. A host who was pro-choice didn't think that that should be allowed, that you shouldn't be having 5 abortions, and she was shocked at that, but then was more shocked when the woman said, well, my last one I had at 26 weeks.
Right.
Canadians think this doesn't happen in this country, but we know that's not the case. In fact, we can show people the graphic right now. This is from Statistics Canada. 491 live birth abortions. I don't have a better term for this, folks. These are abortions where the child was born alive and then allowed to die. 52 in 2001, 67 in 2009, a total of 491 in a decade. And if that had happened through school shootings, school attacks, we would be calling for action. We would be doing something. But this gets buried. It gets talked about in pro-life circles, and the rest of the country doesn't want to know, or the rest of the media doesn't want to know. I think Canadians are legitimately horrified about this, and I think that Canadians have an opinion that they want some kind of restrictions. They have a mixed view on this, but the politicians don't want to act on anything, and most of the media says don't even talk about this, don't even change hearts and minds. What do you say? Right.
Well, the unwillingness of politicians to act on this is extremely aggravating because public opinion is in favor of changing the law to some degree right now. A majority of Canadians do not support our status quo, which is acceptance for abortion on demand through all 9 months of pregnancy.
Paid for by taxpayers.
Paid for, exactly. So there is an outcry about this. Why aren't our elected representatives who are in there to represent us representing what we think when it comes to late-term abortions, and certainly when it comes to matters of infanticide?
Infanticide was before the Supreme Court. They released a decision today on the issue. This is a woman from out west who
Actually, Mississauga.
Mississauga?
Yeah, right here in Ontario.
I thought it was a Western Canadian one. So she had been renting an apartment. She left the apartment. The landlord's in cleaning it up, finds a dead baby wrapped up in a bag.
Yeah.
And the woman's charged with concealing a body, which is a criminal offense to do this. But she was acquitted. The Supreme Court came out with what I think is a mixed judgment for me. They seem to be saying she gets a new trial and we're going to tighten up the law. What's your reaction to that? Well, first, let me read from Justice Morris Fish, who's about to retire. He wrote the decision. In its application to a child that died before birth, Section 243, that's Section 243 of the Criminal Code, only captures the delivery of a child that was likely to be born alive. And I recall in this context that a conviction would only lie where the Crown proves that the child, to the knowledge of the accused, would likely have been born alive. The fact is, in this case, we don't know if the child was born alive or it was a stillbirth. The mother claims a stillbirth, yet she still went and wrapped the baby up in a plastic bag and hid it. So
right. Well, it
there's
shows
something untoward there.
Absolutely. I mean, it shows total disregard for a fellow human being. And in this particular case, we're talking about one's offspring. What has become of our culture that in the face of losing a child, we throw it in a bag and leave it on a balcony instead of go to the hospital, you know, have a funeral, bury the child, and show respect for the body of this baby. And so that's really now what's under question, is the improper, you know, disposal of a body of another human being. And of course, the question is, indeed, did that baby come out alive or dead? But either way, we're talking about a human being. And people are squabbling over this, as we should, but why aren't we squabbling over earlier as well, when we are losing children to things like abortion?
Very late in the term, and kids that are born alive. I mean, it's a living, breathing baby. That's, you know, our culture, like it or not, at this point says, once you come out of the womb and you're breathing, you're alive, and yet 491 in a decade. Stephanie Gray, Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, thanks so much.